In campaign 2016, Republican Donald Trump is losing ground in key battleground states.
And now his Democratic rival, Hillary Clinton, is challenging Trump to release his taxes. Yesterday, Clinton released her latest tax returns. They show that she and her husband, former President Bill Clinton, made $10 million last year.
He refuses to do what every other presidential candidate in decades has done and release his tax returns.
The only way we can lose, in my opinion, I really mean this, Pennsylvania, is if cheating goes on.
A new national poll shows Clinton widening her lead over Trump in Colorado, Virginia, and North Carolina. But the race is tighter in Florida. Now, this morning we have some very special campaign 2016 coverage. Republican political consultant and pollster Frank Luntz. We welcome him this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. Well, we're going to talk about several issues in the next hour or so regarding this election, but let's go ahead and start with the heart of the presidential race, the candidates themselves. So first, let's start with GOP nominee Donald Trump.
Well, he's completely unpredictable. In fact, that's the only predictable nature of this election so far. He has a language that resonates with the heartland of America, but it is very much rejected on the West and on the East. This is a guy who appeals to the center of the country. His numbers have decreased over the last 2 weeks since the convention for 3 reasons. Number one, nobody likes a candidate who goes after a Gold Star mom for whatever reason. Number two is that when he says things like the Second Amendment advocates ought to perhaps do something after the election to express their displeasure, people understand what that means. And even if he says that it's a joke or that he wasn't serious, there's a rejection of that kind of language. And number three is that, frankly, he's not likable. And that has been a tremendous challenge for him. They agree with him that the system is rigged. They agree with him that the media takes sides. They agree with him that Washington is broken and Wall Street doesn't have the interests of the average American. But the way that he says it and how he personalizes it, voters have come to really turn against that, which is why 60% of Americans now have a negative opinion of Donald Trump. The last time that happened in a presidential race, never.
Wow. And, you know, we just heard that the chairman of the Republican National Party came out to Trump's defense. He's really trying to show the party, right, that, okay, we still stand behind him, even though a lot of Republicans have backed off of Trump.
There's a concern in, once again, it's all about his communication. It's all about his presentation. We want a change in the country. We do not believe that it's headed in the right direction. We don't believe politicians listen to us. We don't believe Wall Street cares about us. And Trump tapped into that perfectly. But there's a certain change that comes at a national convention, that you move from being a candidate to being presidential. And for Trump, the challenge is in the phrase commander-in-chief. That's where he seems to fall down. And so these Republicans have been challenging him as much on that attribute as anything else. And I'll tell you this, when you look at the election now, she's got a significant lead. He absolutely can still win. But these debates are going to matter to him, and he's going to have to prove more than just he's commander-in-chief. That he is predictable, that he is consistent, and that those attributes that brought him to where he is now, he can bring to the White House. There's some doubt about that, which, again, with the election about 86 days away, he's got a tough road to haul.
Well, the debates, but also his verbiage that he uses on social media also impact this race?
If I were his, and I don't have the phone with me, but I would have taken my phone right now and thrown it across the studio, which is what his campaign manager should do to Donald Trump and Twitter. Just take the phone and remove it. Second is, I would say to him, you know what, now's a good time to go to Europe. Why don't you go for about a month? Because the more that he speaks, the more the election becomes about him. And this is what we've never seen before. If the focus is on Hillary Clinton, her numbers go down. If the focus is on Donald Trump, his numbers go down. The more they speak, the more they campaign, the worse they get.
Interesting.
And that's remarkable in this election season.
Well, and it also seems with Hillary Clinton releasing her tax returns, she's constantly putting him now on the defensive. So she's on the offensive here, and she's putting him on the defensive.
Which is a smart approach, because he doesn't like to be attacked. He doesn't like to be challenged. And that's when he says those things that get him into the most trouble.
Very interesting insight. Thank you so much. Of course, we're going to have more from Frank. We're just getting started this morning. In a few moments, he'll be back to look at Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. And at 6:30, we'll look at some of the biggest issues in this election. So we hope you stick around for that.
Well, we are back with political consultant and pollster Frank Luntz. He's spending the morning here with us on CBS 2 News.
We are very lucky to have him here this morning. And right before the break, he gave us a look at how Trump is faring in the polls. Now, of course, we want to take a look at his opponent, Democrat Hillary Clinton. So how is she faring in the latest polls, Frank?
Even though she's got a negative of just over 50%, which is unprecedented for a Democratic nominee, she's doing better among Latinos than most Democrats do. She's doing better among young people. She's winning the Bernie Sanders vote. But her excelling among women is what's causing that gap between her and Trump to grow, and particularly among women in their 40s and 50s, which had some concerns about her earlier in the campaign. Frankly, if she continues where she's headed right now, this is not just an election victory for her. It could be a landslide, because she's getting upper middle class women that traditionally vote Republican in places like Philadelphia, Baltimore, outside Washington, D.C., in the Virginia suburbs. And that gives her states like Virginia and Pennsylvania, which she not only needs to win, but that's when you start to really get a majority of the Electoral College.
And people are still talking about her emails as Secretary of State. Is this still impacting this race?
I think it's been now factored in, much as they would do with the shares in the stock market, that they've already considered this. But I will raise one point. Two-thirds of Americans believe that she doesn't have the integrity to be president, the honesty and integrity. Once again, and I've said this so often this morning, once again, we're in uncharted territory. We've never had a presidential nominee where so many people in the public believed that she wasn't believable, or that they had issues of trust and confidence in her. She's lucky that Donald Trump is her opponent, but that's still a problem with her. And the Clinton Global Initiative, once again, that has been in the news in the last 3 days because of links to donations, and those donations and the impact that it had on State Department decisions. So she's not free at all. Most likely, this first debate will be the most vicious, personal. I can't wait. I have to create a drinking game for it. We had one for the Democratic debates. Every time Bernie Sanders promised something for free, you had to drink from somebody else's beer. So we're going to create something just like that for Trump and Clinton.
Now, going back to your initial point, why do you think these upper middle class women are voting for Hillary Clinton? They just simply don't like Trump?
They don't like Trump's language. They have issues with Clinton's credibility and integrity. But they have even bigger issues with what Trump says and how he behaves. So they're still undecided voters, but they have shifted towards Clinton. She gave a very strong convention speech. Her campaign has been very positive over the last couple of weeks, and that has moved people. That they are going to be the ones who decide this election. If you ask me to pick one group, it's suburban, upper middle class women in some of these key states such as Florida, Colorado, Ohio. Where they go, America goes.
If you could consult her, what does she need to do to win?
I would tell her that she should appear on 60 Minutes, which fortunately is on this network, and that she should do an interview with Leslie Stahl, of all the people, because the more that she shows humility and the more that she understands the fears that people have about her, the stronger her campaign would get. If she could use the words, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I ask America for its forgiveness." If she's willing to do that, a whole lot of people who don't like Trump's aggressiveness would move. I don't know if she has it in her. My guess is that that's too extreme, that her campaign would never let her do that. But on 60 Minutes, everybody would be watching, and everybody would say, you know what? She's got a heart, not just a head.
Interesting insight. We have a lot more coming up with Frank at 6:30. We're going to look at some of the biggest issues concerning voters as they decide which candidate is for them. Well, political consultant and pollster Frank Luntz is with us this morning. We've been talking about how Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are doing in the polls.
That's right. And now we're going to talk about the American psyche headed into this election. So let's talk about some of the biggest fears that voters are weighing in as they consider the candidates.
Well, the first thing is that almost half of Americans now believe that our best days are behind us. And that has never happened in modern American history, that we actually think that the past, the 50s and 60s, are better than what's coming up in the future. And the tragedy is that more Americans think their kids are going to be worse off than better off. And that also has never happened before. We believe, in fact, there you go. I love the 10% that have no opinion on the direction of the country. I don't know where they are. I don't know what they're doing, but it is what it is. But that's the language right there. That's what bothers me the most. 54% of parents think their kids are going to be worse off. Only 29% think that they're going to be better off. And this is from a generation that 70% felt that they had a better life than their parents. The American dream is in serious trouble, that people do not believe that this intergenerational improvement is going to continue. And that's really what's driving the anger, the frustration that's happening all across America today.
Now, is that an irrational fear, or is there something behind that to support it?
Well, when we were off air, I made a comment to you that the entire beginning of the news broadcast was this murder and that abuse, and it was all negative information. I can't blame the public for those feelings of fear. Say that 3 times fast. But what really bothers them is the sense that they're no longer safe in their country. National security is a big issue for them. And they no longer believe in the economic security that they once had, that the economy just doesn't seem to be working for enough Americans. I'm going to give you 2 statistics. 53% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. By their own definition, they're struggling to get by, more than half. And 58% of Americans believe that the economy doesn't do for them what they were promised. So you have this sense of denied expectations and this sense of struggling that still exists today. Combine them, add kids to the picture, and you got a very pessimistic electorate.
What messages do the candidates need to get across to help this?
I'll give you 3 examples. Number 1, just balance the budget. If families have to do it every day, find those areas that you can cut, do a forensic audit of the budget, and balance it. Number 2, you have a responsibility to bring that sense of security. And that means you've got to work together. They're tired of the partisanship. They're tired of this ideological battle between left and right. They just want to get it done. And number 3 is basically look the American people straight in the eye, say what you mean and mean what you say. And that's not happening. All 3 of these are not happening at the presidential level, which is why so many Americans are so angry with their politicians and politics right now.
And that's why we saw Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders do so well. They both were kind of the outside the beltway candidates, right?
Correct. I'd say to people that Bernie Sanders was so old, it takes him an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes. The fact is, he connected to young people so effectively because they saw him as their voice and they saw him as the person who's willing to fight for them. And in fact, I know we've got coming up some millennial data that is going to freak people out. It is by far, to me, the most surprising data that I've done all year, and a little upsetting.
We are back with political consultant and pollster Frank Luntz. He's been with us all morning long talking about campaign 2016.
And the last topic we're going to hit on this morning, millennials. How are the younger voters impacting this election? And my first question to you, Frank, is what qualifies exactly as a millennial? Because we hear that term all the time.
So we define it based on how people live their lives. Your 18th birthday is an important birthday, your 21st birthday, and your 30th. So we did 18 to 29-year-olds, and we asked them a whole host of questions. And the 2 that stood out to me, what's the best form of economics? Capitalism, socialism, or communism? And to my shock and my fear and my anger, only 1 out of 3 chose capitalism. That 58% now choose socialism. I can show you historically, back in 1992 it was 31% chose socialism. In 2008 it was up to 47%. So Bernie Sanders has been very effective at changing the mindset, the economic mindset of that 18 to 29-year-old block. So everybody who's watching right now better be prepared to give up your house and your stuff because your kids want it and they're not going to wait until you die. And the other aspect from young people is that they see corporate America as being what's wrong with the country, and they don't like Washington much either. But corporate America is the most significant one. By 2 to 1, they think that big corporations represent what's bad about the country, even though they're all going to be working for them or are currently working for them right now. So they don't like the economy. They don't like our system of government. So many of them voted for Bernie Sanders in this last election, and frankly, they're still up for grabs.
So you feel the GOP has lost this generation?
They lost them with Bill Clinton, they lost them with Barack Obama, and the amazing thing is if you go back to the 1980s, Ronald Reagan got 64% of them in 1984, two out of three, which is remarkable because Reagan was the oldest candidate at that point, and then Bernie Sanders wins a whole bunch this time. If you are young and your first 3 votes are for a political party, the odds are so overwhelming that every vote you take from that point will be with the same political party.
So what, Frank, do you think is responsible for this shift? Why are younger voters now saying that socialism is the best form of economics?
Because I think that they were raised, I'm going to be controversial here, but everyone gets a trophy now. You can't say something. I was a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and I used to take my kids on. And I would say to them, you know what? That's the most pathetic communication I've heard. Sit down, figure out what you're going to say. I'm going to call on you in 10 minutes, and I want you to be great. I want you to be articulate. I want you to be smart. I don't want you to touch your hair. I don't want you to say and ah. Present. You can't do that. You have to tell young people now, oh, they're great. They're wonderful. You have to be affirmative because it's all about self-esteem rather than knowledge and effectiveness and just doing your job well. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2, frankly, is social media. It is so negative and so hostile, and it lacks thought, it lacks knowledge and wisdom, and it's immediate. So they're taught to express every thought right now in 140 characters without any context, and I think that that undercuts also the training that they have. And finally, look, our schools are not producing for them. Our teachers are not teaching them what they need to know. Our parents aren't demanding that they learn what they need to learn, and they're just skating by. And I'm very afraid for this generation and the impact that it will have on the country going forward. If we lose these kids, if they're not learning what they need to learn, then we're in trouble as a country and as a society. Please, you got to end on a positive note. This is morning television. Say something good, because I don't have it.
Yeah.
It's tough.
We always have the weather report, Frank. That's
Yes.
always good in Southern
But
California.
I'm going to the game, and basically you're telling me it's going to be about 95 degrees there, and you've already told me that I can't park anywhere, so even that's bad news. Something good. Well, you know what? At least the sun came out this morning.
It did. Well, Frank, we really do appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
As gloomy a picture as you might present, we appreciate you being here. So thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And you can be part of one of Frank's focus groups. To find out how, go to CBS LA, click on Seen on TV. Stay with us. We'll be right back.